Today's episode, Josh and I are going to break down just how crazy Russell Westbrook's going right now and tie in the triple-double record. Jaylen Brown's very recent, as of an hour ago before recording, injury news for the Celtics. Our top three MVP brackets as we're coming down very close to the wire here at the end of the season. And, of course, you guessed it. What would it be other than trivia? Wait, J. Cole's doing what? Welcome back to today's episode of the Two Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor.
I'm Josh.
And we are glad to have you back. Just off the top here, if you don't mind just subscribing, give us a 5-star review, and following us on Twitter at Two Pointers and on Facebook at the Two Pointers Podcast. We appreciate all the support and love. Shout out to all of you on Twitter and who download and who like us on Facebook. How's it going, Josh? How's your week been?
Well, it's Monday, so there's not been much of a week to have yet. But
our week is basically Monday to Monday. Come on, you know that by now.
It's a good week, busy, but hey, vacation the rest of this week. So,
yep. And ironically enough, there's nothing really going on NBA wise after this. So you're really going to have to just buckle down and just keep preparing to the playoffs, like we mentioned last week. But I guess we'll open it up if we have nothing other than just, welcome back. We're glad to have you. Of course, it's always fun Monday around here, around the Two Pointers Podcast. I'm just going to open it up, of course, by going and right into Russell Westbrook, like I said up at the top. As someone who's been on the record, and my Russell Westbrook opinion has changed so many times over the last 8 years, 10 years, whatever you may, however long he's been in the league. He's been in the league a while now. As of Saturday, May 8th, of course, he tied Oscar Robertson for the all-time triple-double record with 181. That is crazy, and there's no other way to put that. Crazy is the best word possible to think that he's going to now average triple-double for the fourth straight season or fourth total season. In 36 minutes this year, however, though, just want to put this out there, and Josh and I can there's really no debate. It's just, man, it's just highlighting such a great career of a guy that, we've probably all had different thoughts and opinions of all over the board. But in 36 minutes this year, he's got 22 points per game, 11.6 rebounds per game, and 11.5 assists per game. Yes, that was not backwards. He is averaging 0.1 more rebounds than he is assists this year as a point guard. Crazy to think. Russ is just one of those wild players. It just is all over the place and does some great things. A key note I did want to make is he is assisting on 47% of all Wizards baskets, which is the second highest. The second highest is behind his 16-17 MVP season at 54%. Josh, what are your thoughts on this marvel of a player we're seeing, who's, by the way, 6'3", averaging 11.6 rebounds a game?
Yeah, you're right about it being crazy. But what's funny is that tying like Robertson's triple doubles record kind of felt inevitable at some point with Russell Westbrook. It kind of shocks me that given he's averaged a triple double for 3 seasons and Robertson only averaged a triple double for 1, that it hadn't happened yet. But yeah, I mean, I've always thought Russell Westbrook is great. I've never been on the side of being a critic. I'm not, unlike you, who's in the past had your reservations about Russell Westbrook from a playoff success standpoint. I've always thought he was great. But with like Russ, I think the biggest like critique of him and his triple doubles is that he's stat padding, right? Personally, I think if it was all stat padding, which people are kind of like making it sound like it's easy if it's stat padding, why is he the only one doing it?
Look, at the end of the day, no matter what I or anyone else ever thought about him in the past, regardless, he's still contributing to winning every single night. And this Wizards team, injury riddled aside, COVID, they're one of the top 5 most COVID riddled teams this year. It's no excuse it's going to happen in such an anomaly of a year. Missing Thomas Bryant, he's quite literally just going out there with Bradley Beal now going out with a hamstring injury. He'll be out the next 2 games, which is really going to matter towards play-in time. He's going to obviously go out there and keep them afloat as they beat Indiana the other night on his 2 blocks, one of them being in overtime on the final shot, and he put up over 30 points a game and another triple-double. He just my biggest thing with him now, and I'm always I'm going to balance my opinion of not only him, but anyone I can in our position now. I'm going to be critiqueful in a very positive light. I want him. It's the same example of how, like, you know, I've always wanted Steph to shoot 15 threes a game. We kind of got to see that in April. What if Steph really shot between 10 and 15 threes a game? But Russ right now is attempting in this season 18 field goal attempts per game on 44% shooting. That's not a level of where someone like Russ should be at. My thing is point blank, I want him to shoot less and be a playmaker more. And we know what he can do as a playmaker. That's why I say that. He can be more versatile off the ball. Now, when Beal's hurt and not there, he's going to probably end up taking like 30 shots in the next 5 games, or, you know, 3 to 4 games, however long Beal ends up being out, a minimum of 2 games. But at the end of the day, he shouldn't be chucking up that many shots for a guy of that level of playmaking. I think it'd be amazing to see where he is if he were to take 8 shots a game like he did the other night when he had the 24 assist game, then 22 rebound game or whatever it was. He shot less and was way more successful, and you've got to see a full example of that. What if he did that for a calendar year or for a season, obviously?
Yeah, I think a guy like Russell Westbrook is someone who's going to, like you said, he's a playmaker. He's going to play better on a team where he has someone great to pass the ball to, someone great to set up for an easy shot. And it's not to discredit that at all, because Russell Westbrook can be just as responsible for the Wizards gaining 3 points by setting up all the work for a player to have a wide open 3. And he's just as responsible for that. It'll be interesting going forward to see how he does now that Bradley Beal is hurt. So he'll have his first game without Beal soon. I believe Beal still had a big impact in that last game. He wasn't out the whole game. He got hurt during the game and was still very influential in the victory.
He had 50. He was very influential. He had 50. Yeah. Absolutely.
So it'll be interesting to see where the Wizards go from here with Russ and no Beal, and given that Bradley Beal's having the greatest year of his entire career. So
not even close. Yeah. They actually have a chance tonight he has a chance to break the record tonight, as well as I think if he breaks the record tonight against the Hawks, I want to see it in a W no matter Beal or not out. Like, I want to see that, obviously, him able to continue to lead them to winning. I can't go any further without mentioning these last 2 stats I had. And this just shows you what kind of marvel of a stat type player that he is, and just how big of an anomaly he truly is. I have to mention these 2 things, and these might be reactions for you because you may have never heard these, or neither of the listeners maybe. One of them is going to back up my point about him shooting less, and I'm going to start with that one. Russell Westbrook has 136 triple doubles in the last 295 games in the last 4 or 5 seasons, basically in the total there, because we haven't completed the full 5th season. In that same time frame, Russell Westbrook shot 43%. 43.5, if you want to be specific, from the floor. Meaning, he is more likely to record a triple-double in the last 5 seasons than he is to score a basket. He needs to shoot less and be a playmaker. That's all I got out of that, in my opinion. I just wanted to make sure I at least said that. That's wild.
Oh yeah.
Stat marvels. These are like you're gonna look back when this next generation is gonna go, that Russell Westbrook guy, man, he tore it up. Like, you're gonna look at stuff like that and go, what? The other thing is that he's 6'3" and he's averaging more rebounds than 7-foot Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic per game.
It's all effort.
Giannis, DeAndre Ayton, Nikola Vucevic, all at 6'11". He is averaging more rebounds per game than those 5 players. Some of the best 5 big men are bigger, taller guys in the league right now. It's wild. He's doing things that we haven't seen since Oscar Robertson. Even Magic at 6'9" at the point guard position wasn't doing some of these things. It's crazy. I don't think he's going to finish, above Magic or near Magic like his coach Scott Brooks ever so thought the other day. Got to back your guy up, because at this point, I think honestly that was probably for Scott Brooks to keep his job, or try to keep his job. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that, Josh. I thought it was wild. I'm coming around on him as much as I might not have been a few years ago.
Rebounding in the NBA is all effort. I remember reading stories where the NBA players talk about it themselves. A lot of times, especially you'll see it on free throw lines. Sometimes the players will take the play off. They won't even go for the board. And it's got a lot to do with the grind of the regular season. It's not something that you see a lot in the playoffs, but rebounding, even at every level of basketball, while being tall helps. It's all effort. It's all fundamental boxing out. And being able to jump as high as Russell Westbrook can jump helps as well.
And just think that he's, getting into his middle, early to middle 30s, not 40s, holy cow, 30s, and he's still doing what he's doing. I hope he continues to stay healthy, and I want to see him win a ring. I really do. I hate that that's so much of a weight on his all-time ranking, and we're not going to break down his all-time ranking unless you really want to torture me, and really grill me for, and ask me my opinion on that. But I think it's definitely like the book isn't closed on him, obviously. He needs to hit this next level of his career where maybe he'll be able to be a really, really, really impactful second or third star on a team that could win a championship, or even a role player. I wouldn't be upset if he won a ring at 36 years old as a role player for a team. I'm going to be happy for a guy like him because he deserves it. And, all his hard work and time in Oklahoma City after Durant and Harden left.
It'll be interesting to see where he goes when his contract expires in Washington. I'm not familiar with how much longer he has on his contract. I don't know if you know, but I feel like it's not 2 years is what I was. Yeah, 2 years is what I was thinking. So, I mean, he'll still be pretty good Russell Westbrook when he becomes a free agent. Like, he's not going to be like an old Russell Westbrook that isn't going to keep producing. He'll still be a really good Russell Westbrook once he becomes a free agent again. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes to play next.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw this in here completely out of order as the top of the episode there, as you might have heard, listeners. This is not a joke, I think. As long as, Woj's reputation is on the line here, I don't think it's a joke or Shams, I think. One of the two of them. At this point, it was just so wild today that I didn't think it was almost real. The same week just after the same week here that J. Cole announced an album being dropped on Friday, which – as a J. Cole fan, as a North Carolinian, I'm looking forward to it. Met him before. He's a very nice fellow. What I am now ever so confused about, though, is he dropping an album on Friday, and then 2 days later, he'll be starting in the Basketball Africa League. What? What are your thoughts?
So first, when I first saw it, I thought it was the NBA Africa League, and I was really confused because I thought that was an NBA developmental league. I've come to learn it's not the NBA Africa League. Basketball Africa League is a joint partnership between the NBA and FIBA. Maybe this still has something to do with what the NBA Africa League is. I'm not fully sure, but it's essentially the team he's playing for is the pro basketball team from Rwanda that won the Rwandan Pro Basketball Championship this past year and has qualified to compete in the Basketball Africa League against the best pro teams in Africa. It's a story. I don't know what to tell you. My only experience with J. Cole in basketball is watching him perform the what was it? Was it halftime or pre-show at the Charlotte All-Star game?
That as well, one of those two, as well as he's been a multiple time participant in the Celebrity All-Star game. And he's early on when he didn't even have the long hair, this was like back in, the warm-up days with J. Cole / he was actually a little bit bigger then. It might've been that early album days of him, but this is a really big deal. This is and I'm going to say non-athlete, and I'm going to make sure I'm safe in my preface. No, he's a musician first, athlete.
Yeah, okay.
But he was a walk-on at St. John's, and he was a stud here in North Carolina in high school. Shame on me for not knowing the high school off the top of my head. But he was really good. He's always been showcased in these celebrity games. He's always been showcased. He's played pickup with the NBA players, and he looks like he's holding his own. It's wild. I'm not saying he's making the league. This is the farthest thing what I'm saying. This is going to give him a showcase. I think he's always wanted this. There's never been an opportunity for a guy like him. There's an old expression, the rapper now, I cannot think off the top of my head, but there's always an old line or an old, rappers want to be ball players want to be rappers. And that's how this is truly bringing these worlds together. And as a fan of both, I couldn't be happier. So what a fun weekend for Cole fans. album on Friday. Get to see him, hopefully dunking on somebody or dunking on something. He can dunk. He's done it. He's done it before. Now, granted, last time he dunked, it was on Quavo and Kevin Hart. Nothing against Quavo and Kevin Hart, but he's playing against real basketball players now. And yeah, man, it's crazy. He is 36, to be clear, but he is a very athletic and quick 36. I'm really excited. I'm going to be watching it in some way if I can find the stream for it, or if I can find if it's on. I'm sure it's going to be televised in some way. But
it might be hard for you to find, but who knows with J. Cole? I mean, it's
going to be.
It's obviously a move to try to send publicity for J. Cole and publicity for Basketball Africa League. So,
100%. Before we transition into the Jaylen Brown news, I do want to say 2 minutes ago, Russell Westbrook is closing in on breaking the record. He just needs 3 rebounds to pass Oscar Robertson for the all-time triple-double record. Live podcast news, folks. You'd love to see it, except you'll see it 48 hours later, basically 24 to 48 hours later. I think there's quite some time left in that game, so I just wanted to make sure that he's very close, 3 rebounds away. He's going to do it. Like you said, it's effort. He knows he's 3 rebounds away. He's going to get the record tonight against the Hawks. All right. We'll keep rolling us down through again, because I think the listeners could probably guess the MVP ballots are going to take quite some time here on this episode, because we're going to go through and discuss some of the top candidates there. But before we do that, this news is so fresh that this segment might be a minute and a half. I really don't know. Josh sounds like he had some stuff he wanted to say when him and I were talking pre-pod. But nonetheless, Jaylen Brown going out with a wrist injury. I haven't even looked in detail about what the wrist injury is, but it is a wrist injury nonetheless. It's a huge blow for the Celtics, who we just covered for a good amount of time on last week's spot about Tatum's performance and just where we think they're going to rank in the Eastern Conference. Man, what a tough blow for the Celtics.
Yeah, this really sucks for Jaylen Brown. It sucks for Boston. So, look, it's a torn ligament in his left wrist, so in his non-shooting hand. But, yeah, I mean, it's a tough way to go right before the end of the season here. I wish for him, you don't want to see great players. I'm a big fan of Jaylen Brown. I love watching him play. I think he's an incredible athlete. I think he's criminally underrated a lot of the times because he's just, I feel like in Boston, often seen and being in Jason Tatum's shadow. But we talked on the last podcast with the Celtics. The Celtics would go as far as Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown will carry them. Now the Celtics will go as far as Jason Tatum will carry them on his own.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate blow for a team that I'm disappointed by the fact that the East, could have used that little bit of competition there with 2 guys that we talked about last week. Like you said, Tatum, Brown, obviously. We're gonna miss a guy who this year averaged 24 points per game on 48% shooting. This has been a career year for him, and he earned, like I said, great timing in terms of when this happened. Obviously not great timing at all for an injury. Yes, what I mean by that is he earned his bonus already for games played and for making an All-Star game, like I mentioned last week. So he was able to step it up enough to make the All-Star game and play as many games as the most games he's ever played in a season.
Yeah,
in terms of full health. So, I mean, do we even know? Was it in the game? I guess I didn't really even I haven't went back and watched the Celtics game from yesterday, but there was a collision that you mentioned before. That was an ankle. Apparently,
how it happened. They say he will be going under a surgical procedure that was the same one that Romeo Langford had with Boston for ligament in his wrist, and it took Langford 5.5 months.
Wow.
Recover.
Yeah, so non-shooting hand, wrist injuries, I think as long as you're able to build the strength back up, I don't foresee this being something that's going to derail a guy like Jaylen Brown. He's going to come back to full form next year. One can hope, at least. From what I understand reading now here from ESPN's Bobby Marks, Brown had missed the past 3 games with a sprained ankle after the collision with Tatum. So somehow that collision caused the ankle injury. So this must have been something either practice related or something regardless, it doesn't matter. It's sad to see, and it's going to now be an ever so, and we'll talk about the East in a little bit here, at least on my side of things for the MVP ballots. But it's going to be a really tight race at the top. I don't necessarily know how much competition there's going to be from that 5 to 10 window there, because a team like Boston is going to be in there, and they could have scared somebody if both of them were playing really well and were able to catch somebody in the right series. But it is what it is, man. It's we've been very clear about how we feel about the season and how we feel about how injuries have come up. And sorry to Boston fans, man.
Okay, so now Trevor and I are going to introduce and talk about our MVP ballots. Now, I've been completely outspoken about how I don't think it's an MVP race. I wanted to have this conversation because I think it's fun to look at second and third, and I think that my picks are going to be, controversial, but I think it'll just be interesting. I'm going to give my picks. I can go first, honestly. I'm just going to give them to Trevor. I'm going to hear what he has to say, and then I'll come back and explain what I'm doing. I'm going to start with one only because it's obvious, and if you listen to this podcast before, you'll know what it is. Because Nikola Jokic is winning the MVP award. Period. The end. He's had one of the greatest seasons I've personally ever seen. He's completely earned it. There's no one close, and Jokic is winning. My 2 and 3, not really in a changeable order. I teased this, and I think Trevor took it as a joke in one podcast I had in the past, where if I said I had a second place vote in the MVP, who I would pick, and I think it's Rudy Gobert. And if I were saying third, I would say Damian Lillard. Trevor, what do you think of what I have to say?
Yeah, this segment's taken a long time tonight because we have both agree on Jokic. That's not all right. I'm just going to read my note on Jokic and then we can move on. Josh and I have made it clear, period. The MVP is Jokic, period. That was it. That was all I had. I didn't write anything else down on Jokic other than some stats that if we had to, for some reason, bring them up. I'm struggling. I'm struggling to pull the pieces together here. And I know your basketball brain well enough after knowing you my whole life. But I have to hear you have to have an explanation prepared, not just for me, but for the 500 people. They're going to hear this and they're going to want to hear this explanation. You're going to get torched, and I cannot wait to hear this. Go ahead.
Okay. So the reasoning I look into it, I'm very much a stat head when it comes to basketball. And I look a lot at win shares. I think win shares, especially in breaking down offensive and defensive, shows how much a player is contributing to his specific team winning. The Utah Jazz are the best team in the NBA. Rudy Gobert is the reason for that. Donovan Mitchell is a huge part as well, but Rudy Gobert is not only having one of his greatest defensive seasons ever, he's averaging almost 3 blocks per game. His defensive rebound percentage is at 32%, which is the highest of his entire career. Think into what that means. Every time a team misses a shot against the Utah Jazz, if Gobert is in the game, he gets every third one. He's having one of his highest averaging defensive rebounding seasons. He's contributing almost 15 points a game in a loaded Jazz offense. I mean, that offense is loaded with shooters, and he's still scoring 15 points per game, and the team is killing it. And then you have to look at what's not in the stat sheet. Rudy Gobert shuts everyone down. There's a reason he's won so many Defensive Player of the Year awards. And the reason that people are going to kind of just not understand what I'm saying, Rudy Gobert, when we pick MVPs, it's obvious, like from the general public conversation of the guys that get zeroed in on, it's all about them shooting. Everybody only cares about the guys if they're scoring 30 some points per game. That's the only time when people are going off like, is this an MVP conversation? Rudy Gobert shuts everyone down. Period. The end. Good luck beating the Jazz if you have to get to the basket.
So I'm going to start by saying this. He's doing this. And look, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm a fan of Donovan Mitchell, but Gobert's the best player on his team. I'm not disagreeing with you there, quite literally. And I've watched enough Jazz games to show you that you and I both have. He's doing this in 30 minutes per game. So career low in minutes per game other than his first and second seasons. His second, if you don't count his rookie season where he played 9.6 minutes a game.
Realize that 30 minutes per game, he is second in total win shares in the NBA, only behind Nikola Jokic, which is a cumulative stat. It doesn't adjust for minutes played.
Wild.
Not adjusted.
67% from the field. So as efficient as you could be, like middle 2010s DeAndre Jordan, like in terms of field goal percentage and how well he is. 62% from the free throw line. A guy of his size doesn't shoot 62% from the free throw line typically. At least now in today's NBA, you can see it improving, but not. It's just still impressive. However, oh, by the way, and also plus 10, plus minus. However, my two, and I'm not even, look, this isn't this isn't a debate. It's a good pick. I would have had him at 2, to be clear. But what two things that come to mind for me is, one, I think back to those series in the past where it got to a point, as good of a defensive player as he was. Now, this was a few years ago. And of course, now that the matchups and the teams are leaving me. But I remember distinctively him playing against certain teams in the playoffs, the Jazz, and he happened to be pulled off the floor because of the small ball lineups and how he can adjust and how he can't play well. The Warriors was one of them, obviously. But in that sense, like, their death lineup, no pun intended, killed Gobert. And I can't unsee that. And now this year's Jazz team, all honesty, is completely different. This year's Jazz team, I'm believing them more because of you more than I ever have. Last year, I wasn't a believer in them. The year before that, I wasn't a believer in them, and I was right both times. I can't say third time can't be the charm this time, because they are the best team in the Western Conference. It is close, but they are the best team in the Western Conference. My second point has nothing to do with Rudy Gobert. The second best player right now, or the second MVP candidate, in my opinion, is Giannis Antetokounmpo. And it sounds ridiculous before you go, whoa, he won 2 in a row. Here we go. Giannis currently, in his, by the way, not MVP favorite season, he's won the last 2. Voters should not turn their head at the fact that he's already won 2. He is averaging more assists per game, steals per game, blocks per game, field goal percentage per game, or field goal percentage in the season, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage, and fewer turnovers per game, with more minutes played than his MVP season. He is playing like one. The Bucks are third in the East, okay? In front of them is half a game behind the Nets and 3.5 behind the Sixers. There's 5-1 against those two teams. He's impacting them in every way possible. He's still playing. He's not even in the defensive player of the year conversation. It's crazy. It's literally Gobert, like you just mentioned, Simmons, very close behind him, and Miles Turner at third. Miles Turner is at third right now in MVP,
I don't think
favorites.
defensive player of the year is a race in the same way I don't think MVP is, but go for it.
I'm saying it's close in the sense that Simmons is a great defender. Now, Gobert's going to win it 3 in a row, no questions asked. But Giannis is playing like he wants an MVP, except for the fact that there's another foreign player in front of him, Nikola Jokic, that is unanimously the favorite. I think it'll be the closest to unanimous we've had, obviously, since Steph.
I'm not going to argue anything on the Antetokounmpo point. You asked me to come with my top 3, and I had Antetokounmpo at 4, so I don't have anything outside of it. You know how much I love the Bucks. I still, although it's getting closer because I'm liking the Sixers more as we get to the playoffs here, I'm still going with the Bucks, barely win the Eastern Conference. I think the Sixers are right there. Right now, I love the Jazz in the West, and so I'm just going to stay with that. I think their team is put together perfectly, but as an all-around basketball team. But yeah, no, I'm not going to argue Giannis. As for, I mean, this is our ballot, like we're talking about. If we were talking about predictions or betting, he's obviously not going to win it a third time. Even if he deserved it, I don't think he would.
To be clear to the listeners, this is our ballot. This is not who, like you just said that. Like, to be clear, this is not what we think is going to happen. This is if we had a vote that's due a week from today. Well, technically 5 days, but you know what I mean. The ballot's due in less than a week. If Josh and I were submitting, hopefully one day we get to a point. We'd love if you guys to keep supporting us. If you can follow us at 2 Pointers on Twitter, we're throwing in a plug right in the middle of MVP ballots because I know people will be listening. And the 2 Pointers on podcast on Facebook, as well as, of course, if you made it this far, please 5-star and download. Anyway, back to what I was saying. The reason I say that is because if we had a vote, this is, or if I had a vote at least, this is exactly how I would vote. Period. These guys deserve it because of the things I just said. I do want to say this before we get to your third and my third as well. Jokic, to fully just seal the Jokic debate, because obviously I don't think next week, because of when we record after the play-in tournament gets seeded and played, that we'll mention MVP whatsoever anymore until June when it's announced. But he is averaging 26 points per game, 10.8 rebounds per game, 8.5 assists per game, and is leading his team to home court advantage right now with Jamal Murray not playing the last 10 games, and they're 9-1 in that stretch. He is the reason the Nuggets aren't even relevant whatsoever. They're not making it out of the first round, depending on the matchup, in my opinion, because of just it's literally Jokic against the world, in my opinion. But Jokic is the best player this year, period. You mentioned also, by the way, one of the best statistical seasons ever in terms of efficiency. You are correct. He is in the top 5 right now, and I don't have a list in front of me. I got it from Kevin O'Connor's article on The Ringer, but he is in the top 5 right now in most efficient, not MVP seasons, by the way. This is completely clear. Efficient seasons ever in terms of Raptor stat and all those other analytical stats that I don't read unless they matter. Period. That's it. He's the best. Or I want to hear your explanation on your third place before I get to mine.
Third, I have the only American player that I put in my top 3 ballot, and weirdly, we may both only have one American. I don't know who's third for you. So, Damian Lillard doing Damian Lillard things. The Blazers are 39-29. I think just like because the Blazers aren't like in that upper echelon of the Western Conference, because with CJ McCollum being hurt, a lot of times it's been tough for Damian Lillard to find a lot of help this season. It looks like everybody else around him has been hurt at some point. But he's averaging 28.6 points per game with 7.6 assists, even while struggling for help around him. And he's having really, one of his best scoring seasons, one of his best overall seasons. And we've said before that we thought if Damian Lillard took a step up, he would be an MVP candidate almost. Well, he took a step up. So I think he's there. I think he's clearly carrying his team. The Trailblazers without Damian Lillard are not good.
So he's missing a lot of key players right now. I'm not going to spend too much time on Damian Lillard. I'm a fan of him. I've made that clear. He's got them, like you said, 39-29. They're 6th in the West right now, ahead of the Lakers, who are missing, LeBron and partly Anthony Davis, up until recently when he started playing well again. So he's got them ahead with no help, and they're currently not in the play-in game. They're only a game back or a game up, but it is what it is. It's Damian Lillard, man. He's going to look back we're going to look back at a guy like him in our generation, and he may be one of those guys that's going to get forgotten about, even though he was so good. He's not going to have enough impact in terms of winning and playoff success and things that, you're going to be able to judge a player negatively for. I hope that I'm to the point with Damian Lillard, if I'm a NBA fan on Twitter that just wants to react to guys and how they perform, they don't get him. I feel like we're 3 seasons past if they don't get him help. I feel like they've given him as much help as they can. And Dame, if you come calling next year, not to LA, to be clear, if Dame comes calling to anywhere next year, or if Shams tweets out Damian Lillard has requested a trade, you know who's not going to be shocked? This half of the Two Pointers podcast. Okay, both halves of the Two Pointers podcast. I'm not going to be shocked, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to be like, and he deserves it. Get out, dog. You're almost. He's in his early 30s. Damian Lillard came out of college. He's 30. Or, technically, I guess, right? But came out of Weber State after playing 4 years. He is a guy that is going to eventually not be able to do the things he's going to be able to do because of the way he's a smaller build guy. I feel for him, man. I really do. And I respect you for, if we were hanging out after the vote, and obviously once we're allowed to discuss it in June, whatever, right? I wouldn't be upset at you if you voted Damian Lillard third. I wouldn't. If I saw the ballot and saw your name and saw that you gave him a third place vote, I feel bad not doing it. And that spoils who I have, at least. I don't have Damian Lillard at third.
I think he's in his prime right now. And I don't want it to turn to the Damian Lillard should be traded podcast, but there are teams with more help and not as injury-prone players who would. Well, everybody wants a Damian Lillard on their team, to be clear. Like, maybe a Golden State wouldn't replace who they have with Damian Lillard. I'm not sure how many other teams wouldn't. Dallas probably wouldn't replace Luka with Damian Lillard because of his. After that, I can't really say for sure there's a team in the NBA that wouldn't replace their starting point guard with Damian Lillard. I'd say Brooklyn would do it right now. No disrespect to the starting point guard in Brooklyn, but that just shows the level that Damian Lillard's at. Like, even a super team there would trade who they had right now for a Damian Lillard. So, yeah, it'll be interesting.
We're going to be ready and on top of it as the NBA season comes to an end the next month and a half, and we're going to be like.
But at the same time, we're saying this, and the next thing we know, like, Portland could win in the 6th spot and be in the Western Conference semifinals, and Portland could actually be doing something. So we never know what could happen.
They made the West Finals 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So they've gone as far as they can. They've squeezed everything they can out of that team.
Unless they do it this year, who knows?
I'm giving up on this. Is the 1 year I don't think they're doing it, except for maybe because the Nuggets obviously are injury riddled. I'm going to reveal my third one, but I'm going to preface 2 things. First one's going to be, I'm going to give a shout out to Julius Randle, because if I had a vote for All NBA, he would be All NBA second team power forward right now. He unfortunately is not my third place. I do have an American, to answer your question from earlier. I do have an American at third. My second thing is I'm going to give you a today in the NBA stat that I got from StatMuse, and it's going to matter. May 10th, 2016, today in the NBA, Steph Curry is named the first unanimous most valuable player award in NBA history and the 11th ever to win it in consecutive seasons. I bring that up for a reason. I am not giving a credit to a guy who has a team who's barely above 500 right now, who, by the way, is playing one of the best seasons, ever by a point guard in terms of statistically and the way he's scoring. But I can't give it to a guy that's 500. And talking about injury-riddled teams, we can see what other guys are doing in this candidacy here that have injury-riddled teams or have battled injuries throughout the year. I love Steph. Sorry. I'm not giving it to a guy that's 35 and 33. No matter what Warriors fans are going to think of me saying that. I have the leader of what I think is going to be the team out of the West, Chris Paul. And I have to just give him every bit of love and respect that he deserves, playing 16 seasons in NBA and being so good. I made the joke 3 weeks ago, and I don't think it's a joke. I would absolutely put money in for an HBO special on Chris Paul doing Hard Knocks, where he goes to NBA teams, fixes them. We laughed about that. It was funny. Shout out to that guy on NBA Twitter for that. But let me just break it down for you. By the way, are you shocked by the Chris Paul choice?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so. I know your basketball brain, like I said. We know each other's basketball brain pretty well.
You got to think this through, because I want to put it in perspective for everyone to understand what we mean by Chris Paul and making a team better. The Phoenix Suns finished in 10th place in the Western Conference last year. They are now in 2nd place, and the only thing about this team that has changed is that Chris Paul now plays for them.
Other than a couple of role players getting better and a couple of players getting swapped out.
But fundamentally roster-wise, the only thing that is different is Chris Paul now plays for the Phoenix Suns.
You know what? I like that you said that, and I'll go right into my first point on Chris Paul, and it caveats right into what you're saying. In the last 10 seasons, since 2010, 2011, the Suns have A, not made the playoffs. B, they are 306 and 489 in that time span. I did the math to look at. I added those numbers up to make sure I proved this point. They are terrible, or were. Sorry, not are. Were terrible. He is a guy that when you say most valuable player, everyone's definition is different. He is the most valuable player, period. Because he came in and turned a team that was a 10 seed that did, by the way, win 8 in a row in the bubble and almost made the playoffs. But regardless of Coach Monty Williams going from that record last year to this year, people are going to try to give him Coach of the Year. It's still Steve Nash, if you ask me. But another Phoenix connection there. But you can sit here and you can kind of see this weird parallel between Steve Nash's first MVP season or his second, because he was obviously closer into Chris Paul's age now, but still not that close because Chris is he's 36 and in his 16th season. He's averaging 16 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, and 8.5 assists. Steve Nash averaged 11.5 for those two MVP seasons. But Chris is still doing things on the floor and impacting the game in ways that there's no way I can describe it other than if you haven't watched Suns games, shame on you.
Chris Paul, it's funny because I think like for years we looked at the Suns team and it's like they've got Devin Booker and they've got DeAndre Ayton and they've got Mikal Bridges. And it's like they at one time had Josh Johnson before that kind of ended up being a bust. But they had so much talent and they couldn't find a way to put the pieces together. Chris Paul came in and somehow figured out exactly how to put the pieces together. Now, I mean, the Suns started to do this. I realized they went undefeated in the bubble. They were the best bubble team we saw. But Chris Paul has been that difference maker on the court with putting this team together for a whole season. And it's honestly incredible. Like, you realize how bad 10th place is? 10th to 2nd. That would be like this if next year the San Antonio Spurs were in 2nd place because they added one player. That is the team that's 10th place in the West right now.
There's a lot of guys that could probably do a turnaround that's similar to that, but not a lot of guys can do a turnaround where culturally and everything about how that team interacts and plays. We knew this though. Like, why are we surprised? It's Chris freaking Paul. It's a guy that we, again, when you talk about all-time ranks, people are going to be like, yeah, of course, Chris Paul. He's a top 5, 7, 10, depending on the person, point guard of all time. And again, a guy who should have won a ring a long time ago. He shouldn't be 16 seasons in wondering if he's going to get a ring if he's like the 14th guy on a roster. But he's still playing like a guy that can contribute.
Chris Paul was the best player or the second best player on a lot of teams that almost did it. And it's tough that he hasn't yet. And I still think he will. I think he'll win a championship. But you got to realize how, like, Chris Paul was that almost that final boss of the Western Conference for years with the Clippers teams and then him with the Rockets. We talk about the fact like Kawhi Leonard ended that Warriors dynasty. Chris Paul almost ended that Warriors dynasty before it really even got started that much. Like before they hit that 3rd title, Chris Paul doesn't get hurt. That Rockets team's winning that Western Conference series.
Yeah, he was a hamstring injury away from probably winning the title that year. 100%. I don't disagree with you. Lastly, on Paul, ring or not, Chris Paul's a top 5 point guard at all time. Yes,
absolutely.
I didn't think we disagreed. No, there's no reason to debate that. He deserves every bit of respect. We got to see. Honestly, I'm going to say this: he was our generation's John Stockton in the sense that a guy that played a really long time, contributed, never won a championship so far, and I'm just going to use that as an easy cop-out caveat or an easy cop-out comparison. Because he's just been one of my favorite players to watch my entire career, or my entire life, his entire career. And like you said, the only real major change is they added Chris Paul and Jay Crowder. And I say that for one last thing, for a reason. I love Chris Paul. This is the segment I was looking forward to this one. This team, unfortunately, and this is my pick out of the West, has no playoff experience minus Jay Crowder and Chris Paul, and that's why I brought them up. This is going to be a year where you probably are just going to have a guy. He's going to be a difference maker because Devin Booker's never been in the playoffs, but I'm going to trust a guy like Devin Booker as a fan of him and what I've seen he can do. I'm going to trust him in playoff series. DeAndre Ayton's been playing great defense this year. Not a stellar defender, but still playing good for a big man. It's going to be fun to watch, man. The West is going to be loaded. We obviously are very clear about how we feel about the Western Conference in terms of the playoffs. And the fact that we've made it this long and we haven't mentioned either Clipper or the Clippers out of the West shows you just how truly stacked this Western Conference is. The Clippers are really good as well, and it's going to be crazy. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it is. And one thing that I am realizing now that I think it'll be something that we'll be talking about 5 to 10 years from now, when Chris Paul retires, if he wants to be, I think he might be one of the most successful, like, star player to NBA coach transitions that we've ever seen. because all he's doing on the court for the Suns is he's coaching them on the court. Like his stats don't pop off the page. They're good stats, but they don't like pop out at you. He's averaging 17 points per game with about 9 assists. I think it's 8.9. He's just leading that team to be great. And I think that he could do that as a coach as well.
Do you think successful college or NBA? No question. The college especially. You think he could be good in college too?
I think you probably could in college too. I can't say for sure. College is more of a difficult. I mean, like we've seen him turn things around in 1 year, but college I think has a lot to do with now pulling guys together who haven't really played together to do well in a short time span. But Chris Paul came in, he hadn't played with those guys, but those guys had been playing together themselves. In college, you got to take a bunch of players who had never played with each other.
I'm sure the moment he says he's hanging it up, I'm sure Wake Forest calls. No question.
I wouldn't be surprised by that. Local Winston-Salem guy. One of the greatest players to ever play in the program. I have to say one of because Tim Duncan was there too, so I can't. So it is time for trivia. And let's hope Trevor gets one this time. So it was going off similarly in my idea of win shares and how much I put into the stat. And so I wanted to talk to Trevor about greatest players of all time in the NBA and looking at the win share statistic. So not looking at total win shares, but there's a stat that's known as win shares per 48 minutes. And it's looking at how much does a player impact a game every 48 minutes for his team. So over one game, how much would a player impact that? Of the top 5, if you could name 3 of them, which you should, like they're for the most part, I know you know who 4 of them are, and I think you should be able to pick 3 of them. If you can name who these top all-time win shares players are in NBA history, I'll give you a point. It's win shares per 48 minutes. So it's not about longevity of career. It's very much on how good they were when they were there.
For a game or a season? You said 48 minutes. I'm confused.
It's their career win shares per 48 minutes.
Okay.
So the stat is win share per 48.
This is not a cop-out whatsoever. Win shares and plus minus are the 2 stats that I know the least about in NBA history. That is not an excuse. I'm going to still try to sweep this. All right. So you mentioned how you said I should probably know 4 of them. I'm confused on the 5th.
You know 4 of the players. Like who 4 of them. I didn't know who one of them was that was in the top 5.
No.
But it'll be fun to talk about.
Okay.
You only have to get 3 of them right to get a point. And afterwards, I'm going to give you the 5 in a random order. And if you can put them in order, I'll give you another one.
All right. That'll be fun, for sure. Here's my question, though. How many guesses do I get, and do I get at least 1 hint?
You get 5 guesses. If I give you a hint, though, you're going to have to get 4 out of 5.
All right. I'll basically save it as a lifeline. All right. Here we go. I'm assuming there's low-hanging fruit. I'm going to go low-hanging fruit, LeBron James.
LeBron James is number 6. He was not in the top 5 of win shares for 48 minutes.
Doesn't he have one of the doesn't he have one of the best win share percentages in NBA history, not 48 minute? I'm pretty sure he does.
He's 3rd in all-time win shares. 6th in win shares per 48. His number's inflated by how long he's been in the league.
All right. Is the other low-hanging fruit at least available? Mr. Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan is in the top 5, yes.
Okay. All right.
Got one
so Jordan.
Yeah.
All right. Jordan's one. One that keeps, when you mentioned this and you said you want to tie it to the episode, the name that kept coming back to me is a guy who won and played a lot of minutes and won a lot over his career for a really long time. And you've mentioned him not too long ago. And his name is Tim Duncan. And for some reason, he keeps coming to my mind as somebody that really could or should be on this list.
I thought you were getting real close there for a second, but Tim Duncan is not in the top 5.
Where is he? Do you know?
I can check while you're thinking of another one. I'm not sure where.
All right. While you're looking it up, my next one. My thing is, the thing I struggle about this stat, and I'm trying to drag on trivia forever because I have to edit this podcast, is I don't know what ties into win share so, at least the per 48 part of it, so heavily. Like, obviously, like, I'm thinking this is not a guess. I'm thinking guys like Shaq, Kareem, Patrick Ewing, Hakeem Olajuwon, guys like that. And Bill Russell. And I don't know what
Tim
matters the
Duncan is
most.
17th.
Okay. So then what weighs so heavily? I mean, okay.
I'll give you a free hint it's not the hint that I was gonna give you to make you do 4.
Okay. All right.
Free hint of the remaining 4, 3 of them are centers.
Okay, so that helps. That's where I was leaning. I was leaning, is it big man? Is it efficiency? So then Kareem's another low-hanging fruit.
Is that your guess?
Kareem is my guess.
Kareem is 7th, right behind LeBron James.
All right, how many guesses is that? I still want to try to guess 5.
So you've already, yeah.
Hakeem is my 5th answer.
Hakeem is also no.
All right, all right, I lost. I'll take the loss. I want to try to put them in order after you give it to me still. Can I guess the one random guy before you say it? And if I get this, I deserve a point.
If you get this, you deserve a point.
This is historical. This is historical all time.
Yeah.
Like, so it includes way back, yeah?
Way back.
John Havlicek is one of the 5.
No.
And see, man, I felt really good about that. All right. Anyway, so go ahead. I'm upset that I literally got 1.
Okay, in alphabetical order.
Alphabetical. Okay, yeah.
I'm doing it so it won't. I'm doing it so I won't like subconsciously give them to you.
Right. Okay.
Wilt Chamberlain.
Oh my! You're low hanging fruit. That's the one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm mad.
Here's the one that I didn't think you would get. Neil Johnston.
I've heard the name because I take a lot of NBA.
Philadelphia Warriors. He led the Philadelphia Warriors to the 1956 NBA championship.
Played with Paul Orezen and a couple of guys back then. Yeah.
Michael Jordan.
Wow. Oh yeah.
Chris Paul.
Wow.
Top 5.
Wow.
And then the one that I thought you were getting close to when you went Tim Duncan, David Robinson.
That was the one center from that era I did not name.
Because I've told you in a past podcast, David Robinson had the 2nd most efficient NBA season all time.
You really got to make me like think super hard, and I love it.
Make you remember everything I've talked about in past podcasts.
All right.
So if you can put those 5 in order.
I'm going to go Wilt at 1.
No.
All right. I give up. Episode's over.
Let me hear the rest of your orders, even though you're not going to get the point.
Wilt's at 1, in my opinion. Obviously, that's wrong. Jordan's at 2, since he's not at 1 in this scenario. Do you want me to just reorder him if I think Wilt's wrong?
Sure. You can reorder it one more time.
All right. Jordan's 1. Yes.
Yeah. Jordan is number 1. Yes.
Robinson's 2.
Robinson is 2.
Paul is 3.
No.
Johnston is 3.
No.
Wilt is 3.
I'll just give it to you. Number 1, the GOAT, Michael Jordan. Barely behind him, and barely. Hey, this is the stat, win shares per 48 minutes. I'm just putting it out there. David Robinson, who is 0.0003 behind Michael Jordan in win shares per 48 minutes. That is the difference. Then there's a bit more of a drop-off to Chamberlain, followed by a bigger drop-off to Johnston, and directly behind Johnston is Paul. Essentially, it goes, in his career, Chris Paul has contributed 0.24 wins to his team for every 48 minutes he's played. So every time Chris Paul plays 48 minutes, his team wins a quarter of a game. That's kind of insane. Michael Jordan's is at 0.2505, which is the all-time highest.
What's wild is, like, it shows you how difficult the per 48 minute part, I think, threw me off. Is I'd love to see, I'm trying to pull up a stat list of win shares in general, like the top 5 in general. And all right, here it is. Win shares, if you were to say total win share, not percentage over 48, right?
Yeah.
If you were just to do win shares, Kareem, I would have gotten it correct. I would have gotten 4 out of 5. No, I wouldn't have. I would have got 3 out of 5. Kareem was 1. Wilt was 2. LeBron was 3. Karl Malone was 4. That one surprises me a little bit. I played a long time, though. Michael Jordan was 5. John Stockton was 6. Tim Duncan was 7. Dirk, KG, and Artis Gilmore. Chris Paul at 12. Oscar Robertson at 11. Just thought that was neat. So, well, hey, it was a good one. I give you that, man. I got to be a little tougher. I mean, last week was good. I gave you a lot of choices, so this has been fun.
Yeah.
Trivia's always been my.
I mean, I feel like this one and last week's were equal difficulty.
100%. I want to end it with, which we'd be dumb if we didn't mention this. Russell Westbrook has officially broken the record. So when the listeners hear this, obviously they'll know that already, but he has broken the all-time triple-double record as of a few moments ago.
That's all I've got for today. Shout out to Chris Paul for being one of the top 5 most efficient players in NBA history. So, yeah, with that, this has been the 2 Pointers podcast. I'm Josh.
I'm Trevor.
And we will see you soon.